What's up, drafters? Welcome back to the table. We're back with another new set. Let's talk about Aetherdrift. Let's talk about wrath removal and combat tricks. Starting off with white as usual. Collision Course for 2 mana at sorcery speed. You get to do X damage to a creature, X's number of creatures and vehicles you control, or you can destroy an artifact. A little modality, destroying the artifact is going to come up a little bit more in this set because there's so many vehicles. Otherwise, these type of effects usually aren't that good. Gallant Strike for 2 mana, instant speed. You get to destroy a creature with toughness 4 or greater. We've been seeing these able to kill creatures with toughness 4 or greater or power 4 or greater recently. This one's only toughness, so I feel like it's a little bit less valuable. There are quite a few vehicles with more than 4 toughness, so that's pretty good. And this can cycle for 2 mana if your opponent doesn't have anything to target with it. Ride's End for 5 mana. You get to exile a creature or vehicle, and it costs 3 less if that permanent is tapped. So we've been seeing these the past couple of sets, and I keep liking them more and more. So this will probably be White's premier removal set of this premier removal spell of the set. Perilous End for 3 mana. You get an artifact that O-rings. Target non-land permanent until the Perilous Snare leaves the battlefield. This is non-land permanent, so it can kill anything of your opponent's. It exiles it, and it will start your engines, as well as at max speed giving a +1/+1 counter to a creature or vehicle you control with a tap. Detention Chariot for 6 mana. You get a 6/6 vehicle that banisher priests. Exile only a creature, and this one can also hit artifact until the vehicle leaves. You can cycle it early on for just the 1 white. Anything with 1 mana pip cycling is going to be valuable. And as far as special guests, we have Cavalier of Dawn, a 5 mana 4/6 vigilance that destroys a non-land permanent, so you can kill anything, and give its controller a 3/3 colorless golem. You can target one of your own spells or one of your own permanents if you need the 3/3, or you can target one of your opponent's creatures if they have something that's a little bit out of control. Moving on to blue, we have the standard bounce spells, counter spells, steal spells, the Time Ebb, and the Ice Cage. Starting off with the 3 bounce spells. Bounce Off for 1 blue mana, instant speed. You get to return a creature or vehicle to its owner's hands. This can target your own creatures or your opponent's creatures. Roadside Blowout for 3 mana. You get to return a creature or vehicle to your opponent's hand that your opponent controls to their hand. This can't target your own stuff, so you can't reset enter the battlefield triggers. But if you target something with a mana value of 1, you get to draw a card. And Spikeshell Harrier, one of my favorite cards of the set, a 5 mana 4/4. When this creature enters, return a creature or vehicle to its owner's hand. Only can target the opponent's stuff. We love these Mana War type effect creatures. This is a 4/4 body for 5 mana. It is an artifact, so it's susceptible to the many artifact removal spells of the set. Trip Up, we have 4 mana, instant speed. Bounce target non-land permanent back to the top or bottom of its owner's library. These time of effects have proven themselves to be pretty good recently. It can also cycle off for 2 mana in a pinch if you needed to draw the card. Stall Out, a sorcery speed, tap a creature or vehicle and put 3 stun counters on it for only 2 mana. We've seen these. We've seen them at instant speed. Either way, they're usually not very good. You're going to have to end the game in a tempo style deck if you want this to be considered an actual piece of removal. And Flood the Engines is our ice cage of the set. It can enchant a creature or vehicle. And most all of these things that usually normally can only target creatures are going to also be able to target vehicles as well. It's going to tap the permanent and make the permanent lose all of its abilities and not be able to untap. A couple of steal spells. Possession Engine, a 5-mana 5/5 vehicle that crews for 3. When this comes into play, you gain control of target creature and opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. The creature can't attack or block, so you're going to want to steal something with an activated ability, the many exhaust effects of the set, or a passive or static ability that gives you value without actually having to attack or block with that creature. And then Trade the Helm, 5 mana, exchange control of target artifact or creature you control and target artifact or creature an opponent controls. So you can trade one of your derpy things away and get their best card, and in a pinch, like many of these other very situational, narrow spells, can be cycled off for 2 mana. There's 3 counter spells in the set. Spell Pierce is going to be a reprint, 1 blue mana, counter a non-creature spell unless controller pays 2. Probably not going to be very good in limited. This can counter the vehicles, the many vehicles of the set, as well as maybe a possible another removal spell. Probably not main deckable. 2 mana, counter target artifact or creature unless its controller pays 4. These counter spells, again, usually aren't very good. 4 mana is a lot. Can be effective on turn 2, but later in the game your opponent can most likely easily pay that extra 4. And Diversion Unit, a 2 mana 2/1 that has the ability to sacrifice itself to counter an instant or sorcery unless your opponent unless its controller pays 3. You're not gonna not see this coming since it's on the body of a creature, and being able to counter just instant sorceries usually isn't going to be good enough for it to be a very effective counterspell. But a 2 mana 2/1 with flying also has the artifact creature subtype for all of the artifacts matters stuff of the set. Taking a look at black, we see our normal discard spells. We see the ability to kill small stuff. We have a target player sacks a creature, and a whole smattering of these cards just straight up kill a guy. Looking at the discard effects of this set, we have 4 mana. Name a card, search opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name, exile them. So this is basically just cranial extraction at uncommon. Usually not gonna be very good in limited. Maybe you sideboard it in sealed to name your opponent's bomb, or maybe a card that you saw multiple of, and that can affect the game in that way. Gastro Raider, a 3 mana 2/1 with Start Your Engines. Its max speed will give it a +1/+1 and menace, making it a pretty good attacker. And when this creature enters, you get to look at your opponent's hand and choose an instant or sorcery card from it, and that player is going to discard that card. So it's going to be sometimes a 2-for-1, a 3 mana 2/1 that makes your opponent discard a card and gives you the information by looking at their hand. Is going to be pretty good most of the time. Intimidation Tactics, it's a 1 black, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose an exile an artifact or a creature card from it, and it does exile it. Later in the game it can be cycled for 3, making it not a dead draw off the top, but still these 1 mana discard effects usually aren't very good. And then finally a 4 mana 4/3 vehicle that crews for 2, and whenever it enters, each opponent discards a card. I don't see this card being very good even in the Artifacts Matters deck. Just paying 4 mana for your opponent to discard 1 card and you don't even get a creature out of the deal is probably not going to be worth it. Take a look at the couple of kill a small creature effects of the set. Grim Bauble for 1 black. -2/-2 to target creature. But this -2/-2 is stapled to an artifact, which will allow you to have a piece of cardboard in play to sacrifice off. It will give you affinity for all your artifact matters stuff. It's a permanent that you can return to your hand with any of the return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand or to the battlefield. And it will also fill your graveyard with its sacrifice this artifact Surveil 2 activated ability. Locust Spray for 1 black mana, instant speed. You get a -1/-1 until end of turn. It can cycle off for 1 black if the effect isn't needed, otherwise it can just be a pretty effective combat trick, or having the ability to kill a 1/1 creature could also be pretty solid. Momentum Breaker is a 2 mana enchantment. It does have start your engines, and whenever you play this enchantment, target player sacrifices a creature. If they can't, they discard a card. So usually these target player sacrifices a creature card aren't very exciting. In limited, your opponent usually has a creature that they want to be sacking off anyways. It's not going to bother them too much. If they have no creature at all, it will at least make them discard a card, so there's a slight upside on that. Now we'll take a look at the cards. Black cards that just straight out destroy creatures or exile from the game. So spin out for 2 black and a generic instant speed. We get destroy target creature or vehicle. This is just strictly better murder. It's murder but can also kill a vehicle. And Siphon Fuel for 5, 4 generic and a black. You get a -6/-6 to on-target creature and you gain 2 life. The gaining 2 life part of this card can effectively help you stabilize a lot better than a lot of these 5 mana -6 cards that we've seen in the past. Hellish Sideswipe for 1 black mana. You get to destroy a creature or vehicle, and as an additional cost you have to sacrifice an artifact or a creature. So for 1 black, being able to destroy anything is going to be good tempo. You can use the sacrifice additional casting cost to put something in your graveyard that you want in your graveyard, that you want to die. And if you sacrifice a vehicle, when doing its casting cost, you get to draw a card. Quag Feast for 2 mana. You get to destroy target creature, planeswalker, or vehicle. And the way this card works is you mill 2 cards and destroy the permanent, destroy the chosen permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So in the early game, this card can only kill something that costs 2 or less. In the later game, it should be able to kill anything for just 2 mana. But again, this is only sorcery speed. And Demonic Junker. For 7 mana, you get a 4/3. Vehicle, crew 2. When the vehicle enters, for each player you get to destroy 1 creature, so you can choose one of your creatures and one of their creatures. If you destroy one of your creatures, it's going to come into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and it also has affinity for artifacts, allowing it to be a lot cheaper than the 7 mana casting cost that it has. So for as little as 1 black mana, you can get a 6/5 crew 2 vehicle that kills one of your opponent's creatures. Should be quite an effective kill spell. Taking a look at red, we have these 4 burn spells. Road Rage for 1 red at instant speed. You get to do 2 damage plus the number of vehicles and or mounts. So if you have 1 vehicle, that's 3. If you have 2 vehicles, that's 4. This should be an extremely powerful red removal spell for only 1 red mana. Gives you good tempo, is an instant, and scales up throughout the game. On turn 1 it's good, on turn 5 it should be good. Lightning Strike. Most likely red's best common. For a red and generic and instant speed, you get to do 3 damage to any target. And this includes the player, so it can kill creatures early on, it can go to the face later in the game, it can be a win condition. Not a whole lot more to say about Lightning Strike. Outpace Oblivion. This one's going to cost 3, 2 generic and a red. It's an enchantment, so at sorcery speed, you get to play the enchantment. It deals 5 damage to a creature or a planeswalker. So this is a 3 for 5 at sorcery speed. And it will also start your engines. And then Crash and Burn at 4 mana, 3 generic and a red. You can choose one at instant speed, destroy target vehicle, or do 6 damage to a creature or planeswalker. We've been seeing these red spells that do 6 damage to a creature for the past while, for the past couple of sets now, and they usually have been costing 5 mana. This one at 4 mana is probably going to play quite a bit better than the 5 mana ones. And it also has the mode to be able to just straight out destroy a vehicle if it's not turned on. Otherwise, the 6 damage should be able to kill pretty much anything in the entire set. These 3 red creatures have the ability to do damage when they come in, leave, or attack. So for 1 mana, you get a 1/1 when it dies. Deal 1 damage to any target. Boommobile. For 2 red and 2 generic, you get a 5/5 that whenever it enters, you get to add 4 mana of any one color, meaning you get the 4 mana that you spent on it back immediately. And it has an exhaust ability that you can use at any point during the game for 2 generic and a red, plus X. This vehicle deals X damage and you put that much counters. So the turn you play it, you get the 4 mana back. You can immediately spend that 4 mana, do 1 point of damage to any target creature or player, and then you put 1 counter on this. Later in the game, it can act as just a fireball and deal its damage to a larger creature or kill your opponent. And Dracosaur Auxiliary for 4 generic and 2 red, you get a Flying Haste creature. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, it deals 3 damage to any target. So again, any target, you can go to the face. This can kill your opponent pretty quickly as it attacks for 4 and then can deal 2 damage to them, effectively 6 damage the turn it comes into play. It has flying, it has haste, so you can trigger its ability the turn that you cast it. And you can also pick off smaller creatures instead of going to your opponent's dome. We have 2 red cards that destroy artifacts. One's on a 3 mana 3/2 body. Whenever this creature enters, you can sacrifice a creature or a vehicle. When you do, destroy target artifact and opponent controls. You can sacrifice this creature and just straight up destroy an artifact, or you can sacrifice another one of your creatures or vehicles that are lying around not doing much of anything, keep the 3/2 and still get to kill an artifact. And then with Sky Crash, we have a generic and a red instant for destroy target artifact, which is Shatter. But this one can be cycled for 1 red. Anything that cycles for even just 1 pip is going to be quite a valuable card, as the floor on it's going to be pretty high. And then we have a special guest red card, Galvanic Blast. For 1 red, you get to do 2 damage to any target. And then if you control 3 or more artifacts, you get to do 4 damage instead. This is any target, so again, can go to face. It can do the last couple of points of damage to help you win the game. Or it can just be a 2 mana, or 1 mana, deal 2. In the early game, you get a shock. Taking a look at green, we have 5 green removal spells. Not very many. The first 3, we have Broken Wings. For 2 generic and a green, you get an instant that destroys an artifact, enchantment, or a creature with flying. There are quite a few artifacts in the set. There are a few enchantments, and flying seems to be pretty valuable, so being able to destroy a flying creature could be pretty good. District Mascot is a 1 mana 1/1 that gets bigger whenever you saddle it, and has the ability to remove 2 +1/+1 counters from the creature, and you get to destroy an artifact. So another artifact destruction spell. There are going to be quite a few artifacts floating around in this set. We've already seen white and red be able to destroy artifacts as well. And finally, Web Strike Elite is a 2-mana 3/3 with reach, cycling for 2 green and X. You can cycle the card and destroy. You can cycle this and destroy an artifact or enchantment with mana value X. So for 3 mana, you get to destroy a 1 mana artifact. For 4 mana, you get to destroy a 2 mana artifact and draw a card. Green has 2 different removal spells that will actually kill creatures. So Plow Through, 1 mana sorcery. It's a fight spell, or you can just straight up destroy a vehicle. And then Run Over is a bite down, 2, 1 generic, 1 green, instant speed. Target creature deals damage, bites target opponent's creature equal to its power. This spell can cost 1 less if you target a mount or a vehicle you control with it. So for 1 mana and instant speed, you can do damage from your mount or vehicle. Now we're on to the multicolored and artifact removals in the set. A couple of multicolored removal spells here. For a generic, a blue and a red, we get to do 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker and then draw a discard. So at instant speed, 3 mana, kill anything, loot. It's going to be quite good. It also will trigger any of the, whenever you discard a card, effects in red and blue. And then for 6 mana, 2 green, 2 black, 2 generic, you get a 6/5 vehicle with crew 3. And whenever that vehicle enters, you get to kill any non-land permanent, not just creature, with converted mana value 4 or less. Can also be cycled early on in the game if you don't have the 6 mana or the heavy color requirements needed to cast it. 3 mythic rare removal cards. We're going to look at Loot Pathfinder. And it does a whole bunch of stuff, but the removal aspect of this is tapping 1 red to do 3 damage to any target. Of course, this can go like all the rest of any targets to any creature your opponent controls or directly to their face. Riptide Gearhulk, a 5 mana 2/4 with double strike and prowess. And whenever it comes into play, you get to oust a creature, meaning put it 3rd from the top of your opponent's library. And then Oil Deep Gearhulk for 4 mana, 2 blue, and a black. You get a 4/4 with lifelink and ward. Whenever this creature enters, you Thought Knot Seer. Look at target player's hand, choose a card from it. If you do, that player discards that card, then draws. Or should I say Vendilion Click. So this isn't directly a removal spell, it's another discard effect, but it can get rid of your opponent's best card. These 2 artifacts here, for 3 mana you get a 2/1 with flying and vigilance and the ability to sacrifice this creature to destroy another artifact. Here we go. Here's another artifact removal piece. So we're up to 6 cards that have destroy target artifact on them, spread throughout the colors. And then Scrap Compactor, a 1 mana artifact. For 3, you get to tap, sack, and deal 3 damage to target creature. And then for 6, you get to tap, sack, and destroy target creature or vehicle. So we've seen both of these effects recently on cards. The tap to do 3 and the tap to destroy, but never on the same card. So having that modality of this spell might bump it up and make it a little bit more effective and a playable card. And then finally, for removal pieces, single target removal pieces, we have a 5 mana 6/5 Sovereign Skyship, Sovereign Council's Flagship, which comes into play or attacks and deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Let's take a look at the wraths in this format. There are 6 wraths. Let's take a look at the first 2. So these first 2 are 5-mana sorceries. The first one is all creatures and vehicles lose indestructibility, then destroy all creatures and vehicles. With cycling too. Usually wraths aren't good in an aggro deck because when you're ahead and all your creatures are in play, the card is effectively useless. This having cycling will allow you to draw into more of your aggressive cards when you're not behind. It is the only true wrath of the set, actually destroying all creatures in play. The rest of them are damage based. Speaking of damage based, we have Explosive Getaway. For 3 generic red and a white, we get to blink one of our own creatures until end of turn, exile it and return it to the battlefield, and then deal 4 damage to all other creatures. This will usually destroy most creatures and wrath the board, and you'll be left with the only one creature in play. Then we have our typical red instant, deal 2 damage to each creature for 3 mana, but this one has cycling. Just like the white wrath, in red you're usually going to want to be aggressive. So having this in your deck and being able to cycle it away whenever you have all your small creatures in play is going to be effective. Otherwise, it can be pretty backbreaking to have access to this spell and be able to wrath all of your opponent's small creatures. And then a 7-mana 5/5 Sheffit Archfiend, 2 black and 5 generic. You get a 5/5 flyer. When this creature enters, all other creatures get -2/-2. And again, this card has cycling if the -2/-2 isn't effective or you can't reach the 7 mana. We have 1 creature with its ability, Winter Curse Rider, 2 mana, 3/2. With its exhaust ability, you can exile artifacts from your graveyard, and all non-artifact creatures get -X/-X till end of turn. So this wrath requires a little bit of setup, and you can see it coming a lot easier as the activated ability requires it to tap, so it won't be able to be used in the same turn that it's played, but can effectively destroy all creatures in play. And then Chandra's Ignition for 5 mana, 2 red, 3 generic, making it the 3rd 5-mana wrath in the set. Out of red and white, we have target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to other creatures and each opponent. So your opponent, you have to have a creature in play big enough to kill all of your opponent's stuff to have this effectively be a wrath. And it will also go to the opponent's face, damage to the face as well. And it's all other creatures, so it won't damage the creature that you're using to basically bite all your opponent's creatures. This is a mass bite spell. Alright, let's take a look at the combat tricks in this set. There are not that many. So there's 1 in white and 1 in black. For 1 white, you get an instant speed +2/+2. Simple enough. If you don't need the +2/+2, you can always cycle it off for 2. Black has 1 black and a generic. Target creature gains Death Touch and Indestructible, and also gets a +1/+1 counter. These ones in blue and red, we have a 4-mana 3/4. That's just a vanilla 3/4, except for when you cycle it for 2 mana, a blue and a generic, you can give a creature or a vehicle -3/-0, effectively allowing you to win combat. So be on the lookout for that. We have Pedal to the Metal, 1 red and X. Target creature gets +X/+0 and gains first strike. You can spend 0 on X, so for 1 red mana you can just give a creature first strike. Otherwise, you can spend 10 on X and use this as a fireball type of effect in the late game. and you can use this to win basically any combat in the mid game. So early game you can use it to save a creature, mid game you can use this to win any combat, and in the late game you can just use it as a fireball effect to target a creature that isn't being blocked. And then we have Burner Rocket for a generic and a red. We get a 3/1 vehicle that has flash. It will only crew for 1. So watch out for the flash this in, crew it, block play. But its combat trick ability, whenever this vehicle enters, target creature gains +2/+0 and gains trample, will allow you to get in and increase your speed because of the trample. It will allow you to trade up on creatures because of the +2/+0. Green has 4 different combat tricks. At 1 mana, we have a Snakeskin Veil variant. For 1 mana instant speed, you get to choose one of these. Target permanent gains hexproof and indestructible. So the Snakeskin Veil hexproof, but no +1/+1 counter, but it will also give the creature indestructible. Or you can put a 1/1 pilot into play, and this can be used as basically a 1 mana 1/1 flash creature. For 2 mana, we have an enchantment that flashes in, enchants a creature or a vehicle, untaps that permanent, and gives it +1/+2 and reach. So do watch out for the untap aspect of this as well as the reach aspect. Bestow Greatness for 3 mana, 2 generic and a green. We have target creature gains +4/+4 and trample. This allows you to push damage. This can save creatures. Be on the lookout for that. And then Agnosaur Rex for 5. You get an 8/8 with trample. Or for 3 mana, you can cycle it, 2 generic and a green. When you cycle this card, you get 2 +1/+1 counters on any creature and or vehicle. And again, it gains trample. And this one will also make it indestructible. So when your opponent has 3 mana up and one of its green, do watch out for Agnosaur Rex. There are 2 creatures with flash in the entire set. A 4 mana clone that you can flash into play, but only copy your creatures. And you can cycle it off if you don't have any creatures in play to copy. And then a 4 mana 4/2 with flash. Whenever this creature enters, another creature or vehicle you control gets +2/+2. So this can be flashed in during combat as a 4/2 to block, as well as giving another one of your creatures +2/+2 to also block a lot more effectively. And that was the removal wrath and combat tricks of Aetherdrift. There's a lot of artifact destruction. There is not very many combat tricks. There are a couple of wraths. And overall, the amount of removal seems pretty low from each one of the colors. Thanks for watching, and do the YouTube stuff.